Okay, so we've just started recording. Just wanting to confirm, Michael and Kylie, that I have your consent to keep this recording and to lodge it as an assignment with Southwest TAFE.
Yep, fine with me.
Thank you very much. Now I'm just going to start sharing my screen. Now, is that coming up for you yet, Kylie? So you should see how to apply for an ABN with some pencils in a picture. Excellent. So you're seeing what I'm seeing, which is fantastic. So the session where
What do I get if I scan the QR code?
Just wait, just be patient. So the lesson we're going through today is applying for an Australian business number. We're going to look at a little bit why we have Australian business numbers, what they're used for, whether you need to apply for one, and have a look at the process of going through and applying for one. But before we start, I'd like to go through a couple of occupational health and safety things so that we can make sure that you're safe, comfortable, hydrated, rested. If you need to stop at any stage, just let me know if you need a break. And because we're pretty much in an office type situation, and this is the sort of situation where you would be if you were going to apply for an ABN, just make sure that you got your computer set up so that it's comfortable and it's not causing any neck or back strain, eye strain, or any of those sorts of things. So you're happy with all that? Yep.
I'd just let you know that I actually have two computers, so if I'm not looking at you, I'm looking at the other computer.
I've just got my screen back from HP because we had a big nasty line through it, and so they replaced it. So I'm actually being able to work with two screens tonight. So you'll see there on the left-hand side of the screen, there's a checklist of what we're going to go through today. So we've looked at the occupational health and safety, so I can tick those off. And we can go to the next part of it, which is, do I need an ABN? Now, the Australian business numbers are looked after by the Australian Business Registry, which is a government department through the Australian Tax Office. And they have this lovely little video, which I'm hoping the sound will work.
Can't see anything though.
To be entitled for an ABN, you need to be carrying on a business. This means you are providing products and services to your customers and not working in someone else's business. Information from your ABN allows customers to check that your registration is current and is used in the planning and development of communities around Australia. So it's important to keep your ABN information up to date. That's your obligation. It's also your responsibility to complete all lodgements, such as BAS.
And it's buffering, which is not a good sign.
No, so early on in the night. We're almost finished.
Yep. Come on. Maybe the tax office has gone down. Okay, it appears that for whatever reason, the tax office is not wanting to let us watch the rest of that video. But basically, you need an ABN if you're going to be operating a business. And just got to work out how to make sure. Is that back to the other screen, you, Kylie?
No, I'm seeing you.
Okay, I apologise for this. I had hoped to practice this.
Yep,
okay, so
got it now.
Beautiful. So you can't have more than one ABN for each taxable entity. So if you're operating as a sole trader and you've got 5 different businesses, you only have one ABN. And the way in which you would differentiate that would be, say, through your accounting software or different business names, etc. But you can only have the one ABN. It's actually an offence to attempt to have two by fiddling with some of your information. It's like you can only have one tax file number. It's very much along the same lines as your tax file number. If you were to search on the internet how to apply for an Australian business number, the first dozen or so entries are going to be people who will do it for you for a fee. And they range from probably $70 or $80, which is not bad for 10 minutes work, through to $150 to $200. If you go and onto the Australian Business Registry website, it's free of charge, and it takes anything from 10 to 15 minutes to go through and apply for that for yourself. So do you need one? Yes, if you're running a business, you need to have an ABN. You could use it either as in a personal way as a sole trader, or you could set it up for a company. There are other organisations that need ABNs, like charities, superannuation funds, and a few other things like that that aren't necessarily perceived by people to be carrying on a business. But the Salvation Army, whilst they're a charity, they are running a business. It just happens to be a charitable, not-for-profit type business. So
same as with hospitals and that kind
yeah,
of thing. I don't see it as a business, but they have ABNs.
yes. I don't know. Private hospitals are very much a big
Well,
business.
I was thinking more along the lines of public ones, but
Yes, but yeah, they have them. So it's a way in which the government can keep track of where money's being made, and it makes tax avoidance that much more difficult. And that's a good thing for the country as a whole, because the less tax avoidance there is, the more money the government has to provide services to us as residents of the country. So how to apply for an ABN? Firstly, do you need one? Are you starting a business or engaged in a business within Australia as an individual? Are you starting a business or engaged in a business within Australia as a registered Australian company? So in Australia, that's generally a proprietary limited company, unless it's listed on the Australian Stock Exchange, in which case then it would be a limited company. If you answer yes to either of those questions, you need an ABN. So if you're going to apply for an ABN, you need some information that you won't necessarily remember, and that's your tax file number. All the rest of the information that you are required to provide the Australian Business Registry when you're applying for an Australian business number, you'll have readily at hand. It'll be things like your email address, your living address, your postal address, your contact phone number, your name, and your date of birth. If you're using an accountant or anything like that, you might, and they're more likely to be wanting to set this up for you, and they'll do that through their portals. But if you're not using an accountant and you're wanting to set it up, that's all the information you need. So it's not a great deal of information to be able to go and set that ABN up.
is it sad that I do know my tax file number off by head?
No, because I do too. But I can tell you every telephone number I've had since I was a child, and that's scary. So how do you apply for an ABN? In your browser, you go to the following website, and I'm not suggesting you do that right now, or you can scan the QR code on screen, that lovely blue and teal one on the left-hand side of your screen. So that's what the QR code is for. So when you're starting your application, you go to that website, and when you go to that website that's linked on the QR code there, it brings up this screen, and there's a great big orange button at the bottom of that screen which says apply or reapply for an ABN. Now,
I already ticked it.
Yeah. Most people don't need to reapply for an ABN. It's only if the Australian Tax Office has cancelled it for some reason, or you applied and you were declined for some reason. And it might be that you're thinking of setting up a business maybe sometime in the future, and you're wanting to get everything prepared, you can't actually apply for the ABN in anticipation of setting up a business. You actually have to be in the process of doing that and ready to commence business. So you need the ABN at that point. So there's a few tricky spots going through the application. Most of the stuff online, it's just you fill in the boxes or put a little dot in the radar spot on the yes or the no questions. They're pretty straightforward, but there are one or two that can cause a little bit of a problem if you're not thinking it through or you don't necessarily understand the questions. And the first of those is for taxation purposes, which type of entity is the applicant? So unless you have a company, partnership or trust or other organisation or a superannuation fund, you're going to be an individual or a sole trader. And that's what most people are when they start business. There's a lot of reasons why that's not a good idea, but anyway, that's another lesson. What's the nature of the activity? There's a drop-down box there that gives a range of options, like it could be a charitable organisation, superannuation fund. It's the one that you're wanting when you're setting up a business is in the form of a business. This is the one that drives most people nuts. Describe the individual sole trader's main business activity. And you put in, say, ice cream shop. Now, for ice cream shop, it does come up with ice cream retailing for immediate consumption. It also gives you around about 30 other options as to what it may or may not be. And there'll be some things, like if you were saying you wanted to set up a business being a nanny, and you type nanny in the box there where it's got the blue circle, there's nothing in this drop down box down here because it goes, doesn't understand it. So sometimes you have to be a little creative with the words that you use in the main business activity. And for other things, like if you're running a financial services business of some description, you've probably got around about 250 to 300 different options that you have to work your way through and decide which one's the most appropriate for your circumstances. And that's, and it might be that you got, as I mentioned before, if you got 3 or 4 different businesses or 5 different businesses, you can only put one in there. So, you know, if you've got an ice cream shop and you have a large flock of chickens and you're selling eggs, and you're being a psychologist and you're doing, you know, teaching in a university as a contractor, you could have 4 different businesses there. It doesn't really matter which one you put in there. They use it for statistical purposes and it really doesn't matter. Probably putting hired hitman wouldn't be a good idea.
All right, I like when I first applied, I think I did have down sort of, you know, selling farm produce, that sort of thing. But the only time I've ever actually used it is when I've been a tutor, because I was an independent contractor. So,
and you know, if you're putting something in like farm produce and those sorts of things, it brings up into the question of, are you a primary producer or not? And then there's a whole range of things that really complicate it sometimes. But because you'll see there at the bottom there is, does the individual sole trader operate on an agricultural property? And definitions of agricultural property for tax purposes are, I think it has to be a minimum of 20 acres.
just certain number of acres, yeah.
So it's for the most part, it's this process of applying for an Australian business number is simple and straightforward. It's things like the main business activity, which requires some thought. And my advice in that circumstance would be to keep it as simple as possible. And if you're operating more than one business, what's the one that's going to cause the least amount of surprises? So, you know, ice cream shop, yep, it works. Ice cream retailing for immediate consumption, and then you just click the next button. The reason for the application. why is the individual trader applying for an ABN? 99 times out of 100 is new business in Australia. It's unlikely that an individual setting up a business is applying for it because they forgot to apply for it in the year 2000 when these came in. And oops, I better catch up with it. If they do that, they've got a lot more troubles than worrying about when. So that's going to be the most common one there. There are other options, like it could be a self-managed superannuation fund or a few other things like that. But for most people, it is the new business in Australia. And that's my daughter's name in there because I had to use a name, a real person to get through to this because I already have an Australian business number myself. This is the declaration page, which is the final page as you're going through the process. Once you've completed this, you hit the submit button, but it's important to take into consideration and read everything that it says there because, and the top line there says there are penalties of up to $12,000 that can apply for each false or misleading statement made in an ABN application. So if you said that you were running an ice cream shop and you were actually running an illegal brothel, they would probably throw the book at you. If you said you were running an ice cream shop and it was actually a lolly shop, they're probably not going to be too fussed about it. So it's like with most things when you're dealing with the tax office, don't tell them any lies because chances are they'll find out. They have unsurpassed data matching facilities in this country. So there's a privacy statement there. There's a number of different areas where they may provide that information to state and federal governments. Centrelink's probably the number one that they will provide this information to, that if you've got an ABN, they will let them know, and that way they sort of match things so that if people are trying to do shifties on it, they can't get away with it. So once you're happy with it all, you go through, you put your date in, the name of the person making that declaration. So if you're making it for yourself, you would put sole trader. If your accountant was doing it, they'd put tax agent. If it was a company, you would put company director or company secretary or whatever office it may be that you're doing. So the process of going through and applying for that ABN will take somewhere between 10 and 20 minutes. And in around about 95% of cases, once you hit that submit button, the next page will tell you what your ABN is. There are a number of reasons why they may not issue the ABN immediately. One of the more common ones are if your personal taxation affairs are not in order. You know, some people go years without filing an income tax return. And if that's the case, then the ATO is not going to give them a license to go out and run a business until they get that stuff sorted out. If your address is in a prison, they're very unlikely to allow you to set up an ABN either, because there's restrictions on where you can and can't do a business, and you can't actually set up a business in prison. So that declaration page, as with most declarations you make to the government, is important to get right. You can save it at that point, go back and check it, make sure that you've got all your information right. If you make a genuine mistake, they're going to help you out, but it's going to take a little bit longer for you to get it all sorted out. So checking before you go and hit that submit button is always a very good idea. So do you have any questions on the necessity for an ABN or how to apply from an ABN?
Don't think so.
I'm going to take that as an assessment. I'm really good at what I'm doing tonight.
You actually made it pretty clear.
Thank you. So do you need an ABN? We can tick that one off. Applying for an ABN, pretty much tick that off. Now it's your turn. And you can either, if you're on your computer, you can either scan that Oh, one other thing before I do go to your turn. If you have an Australian business number, it's very easy to check up, or if you're not sure, it's very easy to check up. I knew I had this there for a reason. You can go to the ABR website and it has their ABN lookup. So if we were to use myself, for example, I have a rather uncommon name, so that makes me very easy to find. If you type John Smith in there for whatever reason, it's a nightmare because it's
you
which.
would have to go by location to try and find it. Try mine.
Yeah. Yep. So if we go back, we'll go back, and it's KYLEEREES, and case doesn't matter. So you can type it in block capitals. So I'm going to guess, because there's two of you, and you live in Victoria, I'm going to assume that one there is yours. And you can see there that you have your business name as Kylie's Capers. You can see when it's started from, and there's an extracted date. So that was extracted today. And it tells you that you're an individual sole trader and whether you're registered for GST or not. So it's easy to find. It's a simple website to get to, and if you just type in ABN lookup in your browser, it'll find it, or you can go just to the Australian Business Register ABR website and they'll find that for you. And I need to go back to sharing this. All right. So, because we're learning a new skill, I'd like you to at least just start the process within your computer and do maybe the first couple of pages. Don't go to the point where you get put your tax file number in, because the minute you do that and you hit the next button, it'll say, you already have one. So it won't allow you to go beyond that. And that's part of making sure that people don't have more than the one Australian business number or the Australian tax file number.
I've already done it.
You've already done it. Okay. So it is a.
And you can get past if you leave it blank.
Oh, okay. I've never actually thought of doing that. You must have a slightly more devious mind than I have.
It asks if you want to apply for one, so it means that they should be able to let you through without one to a certain extent.
Yep.
Yeah.
So you've already used the QR code or the URL. Now I sent you a questionnaire with the questions. And if we can go through one of those questions, just to make sure that we've covered everything that we need to cover.
Yep.
So the first question is, can an individual have more than one Australian business number?
No.
Does an individual need a tax file number if they have an Australian business number?
Yes, or they at least have to apply for one.
Yes. You won't actually get an Australian business number unless you have a tax file number. Yep. You can actually do the application for both of them. You can't do them in the process. You have to have the tax file number before you apply for the Australian business number. And which website would you go to find your Australian business number once you have one?
The whole exact one, but it's abr.gov.au.
Yep, perfect. ABN lookup would also work.
Google
how much,
ABN.
Yeah. How much does it cost? Yep. How much does it cost to apply for an Australian business number if you do it yourself?
Okay.
Beautiful. And if you have an Australian business number, do you have to register for GST?
Not necessarily. If you saw with mine, you saw that I didn't. You have to make a profit of a certain amount per year, which
you need to have
80,000.
you need to have a turnover of $75,000 or more per annum. Now, there's nothing stopping somebody applying at being registered for GST and having a turnover below that. If you do register,
financial sense.
it may and it may not. If you register for GST and you're not earning and not having turnover of more than $75,000, you're not collecting GST. The advantage is that some of the setup costs when you're starting a business, you may have paid quite a lot of GST. So let's say you'd bought $110,000 worth of stock and equipment. If you're registered for GST and you haven't collected any GST, you can get that $10,000 back. So there can be some circumstances where there is an advantage in doing that. But for most people starting up a business, until they hit that $75,000, it's most likely not ideal to be registered for GST, but that would be a question for an accountant who's legally allowed to tell somebody whether they should or shouldn't have one and advise them.
That actually does bring up sort of an interesting thing to think about, because people do buy things that would be considered part of their business. I'm sort of thinking like mine is part of Kylie's Capers, which means that, it's from selling my goats and that kind of thing. So technically that means that all the troughs I've just bought, I can write off as expense.
You can again, you'd need to check with an accountant to get this get proper advice on that. But generally speaking, any cost of running your business is tax deductible. The tax office does have some criteria that you need to meet. Generally $20,000 a year in revenue before you start claiming things. But an accountant would be able to give the appropriate numbers on that, because that changes from time to time. But the tax office differentiates between a hobby where you might make a few dollars and a business. And if you have a hobby that makes you a few dollars, you generally don't have to declare that income on your tax return. But if it starts to become a business, then you get the tax deductions and you get to pay the tax if you make a profit. So it's a relatively fair system in that regard.
Well, so, as I said, I basically use it more for the tutoring, which is sort of the requirement of it. And that, because I'm down as a sole trader, it just gets put on to my tax.
Yep.
And I just do it separately that way, which, to be honest, is probably easier because I don't earn that much money, and the farm really is more of a hobby than anything else. So.
Yeah. So what we've covered today is, we did the standard occupational health stuff at the beginning. We looked at whether you need an Australian business number or not, going through the process of applying for an Australian business number. Generally speaking, this will be somebody wanting to set up a business, or it's ideal for people who are working in clerical roles within accountants, lawyers, financial planners' offices, because they're often doing that sort of thing for clients. Other things that could be learnt in the future would be setting up companies, applying for tax file numbers, and applying for other regulatory requirements within the government system.
Oh, well, I was actually going to suggest applying for a registered business name.
Yes, yeah, applying for a registered business name, which is now administered by ASIC. It used to be a state thing. Now they have it all nationally. And they can be simple processes, but depending on how businesses are structured, it's often those things are better off left to a professional to set up. But if you're just wanting to set up,
does that mean I'm a professional?
No, but you've got a simple structure. So with a simple structure, you don't need to do all that. But if you've got a company and it may be owned partly by a family trust, making sure the right entity owns the business name, the right entity's got the ABN, the right entity's got tax file numbers, and all those sorts of things it's a lot easier to get that right first time than having to try and fix it up after the event. So
going off topic a little bit here, but I've just signed my parents' wills that they had done by the lawyer, and they spelt my dad's name wrong, and it wasn't until I'm sitting there signing it going it's like, yeah, and then they were like, oh, well, it was right in this one, but it's wrong in that one. How did that happen? And I'm like, yeah, but nobody else noticed it until I said something.
Somebody didn't do their job properly.
No.
But if mistakes are made and you've employed a professional to do it, then they need to remedy that. And if there's any fines or anything like that, they're the ones who have to cop it. So if you have no further questions about ABNs, setting them up and the necessity of them, I'm happy to finish that lesson now.
Okay, I've been gone for long enough. Yes.
Beautiful. Thank you very much. I got to turn.
Yeah.
Yay.